How's everybody? You guys look awake. That's a good start. Have some coffee. You ready to go? All right. So today we're talking about branding is like dating. One of the things that I think is really important when you're trying to build a brand, whether a personal brand or a business brand, is to make sure that you are building an authentic relationship, either with other people or with your audiences. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like and how to build one for yourself. A little bit about me. I believe in head and heart centered branding. My agency is called Branding Chicks. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. But this is my philosophy about branding. I feel that it's important to have the head and the heart, both the strategic part, but also the authentic part, right? One without the other doesn't quite work. Regardless of whether you're building a personal brand for your careers or whether you're building a business brand or a product brand or a service brand, being able to be strategic, but also be authentic to yourself and authentic to what you're trying to do and connect authentically with your audience is going to be a big part of what you're doing. So, a little bit about me. Brand 1.0, that's me. I'm cute, right? I always had a pin around my neck, started as a creative. So my background is in graphic design. I did a lot in those spaces. I was a creative director, an art director. I worked in advertising agencies and marketing agencies. I did in-house work. Now I own a studio called Branding Chicks. And I specialize in brand strategy and brand development for women-owned businesses and femme-focused brands. These are some of the people I've worked with. That's more just so that you understand that I work with a lot of different sectors and things like that, and that I get to play with women and the things that they're doing all over the world. So when I think about branding, part of what's allowed me to help other people with their brand is that I've been simultaneously building my own. How many of you are entrepreneurs, right? How many of you work for other people, right, in corporate spaces? So what's important about that is that this is applicable to all of you. And the reason I say that is because even if you're working in a corporate space, even if you plan to stay in a corporate space, it's important for you to be able to stand out, right? How do people know about the work that you're doing? How do they know that you're the one that needs to be elevated to a new position or get new responsibilities? So when I think about my career over the last 25 years, this is kind of how this breaks down for me, right? So design is a big part of it. That's why I started. It kind of morphed into branding. Strategy was a big part of both design and branding for me. And then I was a professor for 13 years, so that gave me an opportunity to kind of dive into education. And diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that is really personal to me. So I've done some professional stuff there, but more often than not, it's just a core value that I try to stand by. So that allows me to do a lot of different things. Speaking is one of them, like today. For me, it's just a bigger classroom. It allows me to teach people about the things that I love. So when you're thinking about what your brand is as a professional, think about the things, the aspects of your job that you really love. Think about the things that light you up, that you get excited about, and that you're not looking at your to-do list and you get to that one thing and you're like, man, I don't want to do that again, right? What's the thing that's the opposite of that? And build your career based on that, because the more authentic you are about that for yourself, the more you get to do with it. And also, probably the more successful you'll be when you think about what that looks like. So lots of teaching and mentoring also makes me happy. And it's a big part of my practice as well. When I think about how I work with clients, teaching them is a big part of how I work with those clients, because I want them to know what branding really is. I want them to know how it applies to their businesses and to their products and to their services, and it makes me happy. So that becomes sort of one of the foundational things about my business. So as you're thinking about your businesses, right, what are the things that you do that allow you to stand out? Like, what is it about how you work with people that allows them to be like, man, I really enjoyed that experience. I got the stuff done, I moved my brand forward, but also, what was it about it that made it so fun? So as we talk about branding, I love this graphic because it gives you a breakdown of what the difference is between sales, advertising, public relations, and branding. So when you look at the 4 quadrants here, one of the branding is the person comes to you and says, hey, I heard that you're good at this thing, right? And the reason why they feel that way about you is because of all of those things that you've put together in one place that has them feel that way about you. So we're going to talk about what some of those things are. Building blocks. That includes a lot of different things. So when you hear the term branding, how would you quantify it? Like, just cold, what would you say branding is? How would you define it? Pictures and logos. Story. What else? What do you stand for? Absolutely. What else? Anybody? Exactly, right? So all of those things are, some of those are elements of that, like that falls into these building blocks, but from an overall standpoint, you want to think about what message that gives people as a whole, right? So some of those building blocks, your messaging, that's your storytelling, that's how you talk about your brand, right? And being strategic about that is important. When I work with clients and we're talking about messaging, we're not just talking about what personality your brand has, but also literally language. Like, why do you choose to use this word over that word, right? How do you talk about the benefits or the values that your brand provides? If you're a service and you do, let's say, social media strategy, right? Like, a lot of people do social media strategy. But what is the value that people get from working specifically with you? How do you quantify that? How do you talk about it? What words do you use? When you talk about pain points and like really being able to solve people's problems, being able to use language that they understand, being able to use language that they've used themselves to talk about the problem that they have, when they hear you say those words, they're immediately like, oh man, they get me. I want to work with that person because they understand me. They understand my issue. They understand what it is that I want. So your messaging is a big part of it. Your visual identity, I call it visual identity. It's the designer in me. But I call it visual identity because it is your logo, but it's all the other elements of your brand visually as well. So what is your color palette? What do those colors say about your brand? And that part is strategic, believe it or not. When you think about whether you decide to use photography, if you use a lot of video, if you use illustration, like what are the ways that you show up visually? Is it lots of geometric shapes and things like that? Is it really organic and kind of free-flowing? All of those things should be strategic. When you know what your brand stands for and the personality of the brand that you're building, then each one of these elements should reflect that, both individually and together. Your brand voice, that's the personality of your brand. How does it sound, right? Some brands are lighthearted, some brands are really humorous, some brands are very sophisticated, some brands are educational, right? So being able to know how you want to show up becomes your litmus test to guide you as you build a brand continuously, because you don't build it one time, it's a living, breathing thing. So every single time you touch it, you're building that brand. Every time you write a new social media post, you're building that brand. Every single time you put out something visual out there, you're building the brand. Every time you meet somebody in a room like this and you tell people what you do, you're building that brand, right? So you want to be strategic about what that looks like. Relationships, that's also a big part of it. Not only the relationships for your business to other businesses, but to individuals, to your audiences. If you're in corporate spaces, that's how you relate to your colleagues. That's how you relate to people that are in other professional spaces that are adjacent to yours. So those relationships become part of your brand. You ever heard that saying that you're the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with? It's kind of like that, right? So like you may not know someone, right? But if someone who knows someone knows you and they're like, well, you're friends with so-and-so? Oh, you must be all right then. You know what I mean? How many times does that happen? It's kind of the same thing. Your marketing, your advertising, of course, and also sales. Like, how do you sell? How do you get people engaged in the thing that you want them to engage with on behalf of your brand? For me, I hated sales. Hated it. Hated the idea of it. In my head, sales equaled greasy car salesman, right? How many people feel that way? But it doesn't have to be that. And I learned that, right? I hired myself a sales coach. And she's like, actually, you're already pretty good at this. You just don't realize you're good at it. What I learned from working with her was that my way of selling is an educational space. Like, I just want to share about this stuff. But by the time I do that, people are like, I trust you already. So yes, I want to work with you, right? So it doesn't have to look one way, but it is a part of your brand. Some people are immediately repelled by a hard sell. Some people like that. Some people like that you're pushy, right? So you have to know that even how you present yourself and how you want people to engage with you is part of your brand. Every single touch point. Like I just said, every touch point you have contributes to your brand. So if you think about some of the brands that we know and love, right? Like, give me a brand, any brand. Apple. Apple, Airbnb. Okay, let's do Apple, right? So if you think about Apple, when it's everything from the product itself, right, down to the packaging that you get. How many times have you bought an Apple product and you get the packaging and you're like, right? It feels real special. Right? Down to how you get greeted in the store, to how people interact with you at the Genius Bar, to what their website looks like. Every single one of those touch points makes a difference, right? How many people go to Trader Joe's? Okay, let me some TJ's. So you go to Trader Joe's, and I think it's part of their brand. I don't know this for sure, but I think it's a strategic move for them to actually ask you about your day at the register. Have you ever been to Trader Joe's and the cashier didn't ask you, like, something? They might ask you something. They might talk about your shoes, or like, it's a nice day outside. What are you gonna do today? Like, it's a very like conversational kind of thing. That is a directive, right? That is a strategic move. You go to Chick-fil-A and they say what? That's strategic, right? You go to Publix, and when you're at the register, they ask you if you found everything, right? So all of those touch points matter, big or small. So it starts with a high-level strategy, but it trickles down in every single aspect of how your audience interacts with your brand. So why do you need it? It matters because you get respect, you build further connections, you get opportunities, and more importantly, you have a very clear vision about who your brand is or who you are, right? Because it makes it so much easier to make decisions, both on behalf of your business or on behalf of like your career path, right? So like if you know who you are as a professional, you know who you are as a marketing professional, then if a new opportunity for a new job comes up, you're gonna be very clear about whether that's the right next step for you or not. Same thing with a business, like every single aspect. Do I want to go speak at that conference? Well, is your audience going to be there? If I'm going to collaborate with another business, does that align with my brand? Does that elevate my brand? Those questions and answers and that clear vision makes it so much easier for you to not just be in a place where you're throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. So how do you woo your audience? This is a big part of it. So we want to make sure that you are getting people to a place where they are delighted to work with you, right? Not like, oh, I got to get this thing done. They seem like they're probably somebody that can help me do that, right? You want people to be truly delighted to work with you. The first stage is attraction, right? So you can't, I think I was talking to somebody about this in the hallway, but like you can't be in a situation, let's say you just see somebody across the room, right? And you're like, they're kind of cute, right? That's the attraction phase. So if you're looking to, let's say, buy a car, and your very first thought is, okay, I want to buy a car. I don't know what kind of car I want necessarily, but as soon as you have that thought that I want to buy a car, now you start to notice cars on the road, and if you make a mental note about the ones that you really like. You see that and you're like, add that to the list, right? That's the attraction. Once you get to that place, then you have a very short period of time to grab people's attention. And the reason why that is because there's so much stimulation, right? Like as we move through our lives on a day-to-day basis, like stuff is coming at us 100 miles an hour, whether it's on social media, whether it's the ads that we see, billboards, commercials, like all those things. So you want to make sure that whatever that first impression is, even if it's a really short one, that it's memorable and you can build upon that. Because it's not just one thing, remember all those touch points, so you get yourself to a place where you can continue to build on top of that. So the next step is interest. So after you've already kind of seen that person from across the room or seen that brand or that product from across the room, the next thing is you start to think about it a little bit more, like, that car looked good going down the road, but, it is kind of sleek, and I think might be in my price range. Yeah, I'm going to add that to the narrowed down list of cars that I want to buy, right? Because now you're really thinking about what it means to do that. The third stage is it's time to shoot your shot, right? So now you might actually go to the dealership and be like, let me see what you guys have. What are my options? I want to test drive it to see if I feel the same way about it, right? And shooting your shot is a really important part of it because as marketers, that's often what we're doing. We are the ones that are going out there to shoot our own shot on behalf of ourselves, or we're going to shoot our shot based on for our clients to someone else, right? So I put this in because this just happened, like this week. I don't know how many of y'all saw this story on Twitter, right? I'm fully invested at this point. So this girl put a post out and said that she logged into Twitter. She immediately saw this picture of this guy with his cap and gown on, but instead of his graduation cap, he has on a Yankee fitted with the tassel, right? And she was immediately drawn to that. She was like, my timeline, it refreshed, and now I can't find him. If y'all know who he is, tell him I want him, right? She shot her shot. And the funny part about that is that the guy posted this. He actually graduated the year before, but he reposted the picture because he was like reminding himself, like, I almost didn't even go to graduation. Like, it was during the pandemic. I only had one ticket. My sister couldn't come, so I wasn't going to go. And then his friend called and said, I'm coming. And so he was like, well, I guess I should go. And so that was the picture, right? So culmination of that, this is just a random person commenting because now there's thousands of people following this story. And he's right. He's like, so you're telling me that you did something that you didn't even want to do. And then somebody tells you you're 10 minutes away. You forgot your grad cap. You said that was the best day of your life. And because you reposted this picture, now you have this woman shooting her shot at you in the DMs, right? So you never know what's gonna happen if you put it out there. So it's no different than your clients. It's no different than yourself. If you are being strategic about your career, being able to put yourself in the right rooms, being able to connect with the right people, being able to tell people what you're good at. Sometimes we want to hold that stuff close to the vest. That doesn't always work, right? You have to let people know what it is that you're good at. Let them know what you enjoy. Like, if that's the way I do it. Like, I'm not going to be like, you know what I'm really good at? But I'm like, what I really love to do, what makes me really happy, and I can go down that rabbit hole, and it gets me really excited, and I love working with clients like that. And then I tell them what it is, right? So that's an equivalent of shooting your shot. So don't be afraid to put yourself or your clients' products and services out there, because that is the thing that gets you in front of people for real, right? Stage 4 is dating. So now that you've got their interests and you've got them kind of on the hook, you have to spend the time to nurture that relationship. It's not something that you can do on a fly-by-night kind of situation. It's also not something that you can do one time and think that it's done, right? Like, how many of you have been on a date, and the first date, you're like, you know what, you're all right. And then they start falling off, and you're like, what happened to that same energy from the first date? I don't know, right? So it's the same, It's consistency, right? So you have to make sure that you're building and nurturing that relationship. And that looks a lot of different ways. So tell me, from a marketing standpoint and the things that you do, how do you nurture relationships with either your audiences, your colleagues, or your clients? Follow up, for sure, right? What else? Getting their feedback, absolutely. Showing appreciation, absolutely, right? So you want to think about, what are those things that are going to keep those people engaged? What are the things that you do that let them know that you really appreciate them, right? Like saying thank you, absolutely. Getting feedback from them, and then if they work with you again and you've implemented that feedback, that says that you're listening, right? Who doesn't want to be wooed by somebody who listens, right? So you want to make sure that you're nurturing that relationship in every way that you can, and doing it in your own way. It doesn't have to look like anybody else's, right? When I have meetings with clients, strategy sessions with clients, I call them play dates. One, because I feel like if you're an adult, you shouldn't have to stop having play dates. But like, you have a meeting invite pop up on your calendar and it says play date with Nakita or with Branding Chicks. That sounds like fun, right? Like, who doesn't want to do that? So when I think about that, and having those meetings regularly means that they know where I am in the process, I know where they are in the process. It's a constant feedback loop, right? So we're constantly in a conversation about their brand, and that lets them know that I'm not only invested, but I'm thinking about them when I'm not talking to them, and I'm working on their behalf, right? When you have somebody that you're dating, if they fall off on communication, it feels like you're not connected anymore, right? Same thing. So you want to get to know your audience in that way. You have to nurture that relationship. Meet and keep your people, right? This is, again, also for your professional standpoint, if you're in corporate spaces, like find the people that are aligned with your brand. Once you're very clear about who you are or who your business is, it makes it really easy to be like, these are my people, right? Even from an audience standpoint, I was talking to somebody about this last night, but like, you know, sometimes you're in a place where you get a lot of business in, but they're not the people you really want to work with, right? And how many people think that that's an uphill battle? Right? Those are the hardest people to work with because they don't get you, they don't get your business, they don't get your process. They may not value your work as much as you think they should, right? So it's hard to work with those people. But when you know your people and you meet those people and you connect with those people, those are the easiest people to work with. They already know who you are. They already know how you move, and they're excited about that. They want that for themselves. They want that for their product. They want that for their businesses. Or if it's an individual, they want to be connected with you because they're like, I want to elevate myself professionally. I want to elevate myself the way they're elevating themselves, right? So meet and keep your people. That also goes back to the nurturing. So you can't just meet them. You got to keep them. Follow up, like you said. Stage 5 is the crossroads. So in any relationship, you have to make a decision whether this is going to keep moving in the right direction or it's not going to go in the right direction, right? So in those crossroads, you have some options. This was another gem I found on Twitter a while ago. But this woman's like, she was dating this guy, and she decided to put together a whole deck about about where they were in the stages of dating, right? Apparently she's a strategist, and she was like, this is what I know, so I applied it to my dating life. I don't know. But it's kind of the same thing, right? Like when you think about whether you want to continue that relationship or not, you have to decide whether you see a future there in some way, or if you don't. It's the same thing with clients, right? Is this a client that I feel like I can really have a long-term relationship with, that I can help them in the long term? Or is this just kind of a one-off kind of, engagement or one-off project with them? And deciding that or knowing what you want that to be, because for some clients, you only want the one thing. You're like, yeah, we don't wrap this up, right? So you want to know which one you want because that dictates what your actions are going to be. The next stage is commitment. So after you're at the crossroads, you want to make sure that you're solid footing. You know that this is what you want to do. So you want to mentor and be mentored. So if you are moving through you're being strategic about your career and your personal brand, like really think about who it is that can help you elevate to the next level. You have a clear vision. You know what you want. Who can help you get there, right? And make sure that you're passing that along. Thank you. Make sure you're passing that along and that people know that the things that you're good at and that you can help them along while somebody else helps you along. And reignite your curiosity. Sometimes once you've moved through those stages of dating and now you're in a good place with those people, it's like it gets a little boring, right? But you don't want it to be that, especially with clients. Like you want them to think and know that you are always thinking about what the next thing is, right? How can I help them next? How can I position them better the next time, right? So reigniting that curiosity for yourself trickles down into everything else. So what does that look like for you, right? Is that a situation where you're like, taking new classes or going to things like this or meeting new people, right? Or you're continuing to learn new skills? Like reignite that curiosity because it filters out into everything else that you're doing. And then the last thing is, how do you know when it's time to shift your brand, right? So if you've been on a path and you're like, I don't know if I still want to do this 10 years from now, right? Like start thinking about what that next goal is or what that detour, it might not be a detour, it's just the next phase. Like what does the next phase look like? And if you're strategic about that, you can spend the next year maneuvering yourself into a position to be able to make that transition and do it well. Same things for your clients, right? If you know a client is, let's say, launching a new product in 6 months, you have 6 months to position them in a place where they're about to be able to launch that product and that people are excited about it. They know it's coming. It doesn't feel off brand, right? Like the audience is ready for it. You want them to be primed and ready by the time that happens. So being able to know when to shift your brand is really important, and how as well. When is, new product, new service, often, especially if it's outside the realm of what your client normally does. If you are moving into a different aspect of your career, for instance, like it's adjacent, but it's not necessarily like on the next logical path, but it's kind of related, then you want to start doing some of those things that make it seem like it makes sense, right? Like, so if let's say you're in social media and you want to move into data analytics, right? You want to start including a lot more of the data and analytics in the things that you talk about, in the ways that you engage, in the classes that you're taking, or workshops that you go to, or even in how you serve your clients. Start talking to them about that stuff so that when you have a new service to offer, it makes sense to them. They're like, oh yeah, you've been talking about that. Let's do it, right? It's an easy sell at that point. So after you can do those things, you've got the commitment, you know what the next step is, you're already ready to move forward. Now you can ride off into the sunset together, right? And that's what you want. You want that long-term relationship where they're excited to be related to you, they're excited about what the relationship is going to look like next, and they're excited about what you have to offer them, right? So those are the stages of dating.